Hey, welcome to another methods video. In this video we're going to be looking at fractions and specifically dividing fractions by whole numbers. So we're not going to be looking at dividing fractions by other fractions, but rather dividing fractions by whole numbers. So let's have a look at a calculation here. So we have a calculation 1/4 divided by 4. 1/4 divided by, not 4, 2, sorry. So when we're dividing fractions, we need to consider actually what division is and what a fraction is. Now there are quite a lot of strategies for doing this. In this video we're going to look at understanding what's actually happening when we divide fractions. And to do this, we're going to look at it in terms of our visual representation here. So there are ways of looking at this. For instance, you could probably tell me what half of a quarter is already, in terms of what makes up a quarter, which is eighths basically if you divide it by 2. But in this video we're looking at then how we look at that in terms of dividing by fractions that have got a numerator greater than 1. In this case we'll start with 1/4. So underneath here I have got a rectangle, and this is going to be my visual representation. So what we're going to do is we're going to represent 1/4 down here on our rectangle. So to represent 1/4 we need to split this rectangle up into 4 parts, and we're doing that because the denominator tells us that the whole, as in the whole amount of this rectangle, has been split into 4 parts. So here we go, we've got our rectangle and it's split into 4 parts. Now we're interested in only one of these parts, which is told to us by the numerator. The numerator tells us we're interested in 1 out of the 4 parts that the whole has been split into. So we're going to shade 1/4 of these, this shape, and we split it into 4 already, so we're just going to shade 1/4 of it. And there we go. So we've got our visual representation of 1/4 like this. Okay, now we can have a look at the whole number that we are dividing by, our divisor here. So when we're considering this, we'll think about what division is, what we do when we generally divide numbers by 2. Now another way of saying that is splitting it in half. What we're also looking at in terms of division is that we're going to create 2 groups. We are going to split our, whatever the dividend here is, we're going to split that into 2 groups. And it's the same when we're dealing with fractions. So what we're going to do is we're going to split this quarter into 2 groups. So I'm going to draw a line across here to split it into 2 groups. Now obviously if we're being super accurate here, I would make sure that each of these was exactly equal. I'm not going to do that just yet, so I'm just going to make a rough estimate of what a half would be. Then actually I'm going to continue that line throughout the whole shape, and this is going to help me understand what's going on here. So what we've done here is we've split our quarter into 2 groups. We have got one group here and one group here. Okay, now we only want to know what half of a quarter is, so we only want to know what one of these halves would be, one of these, as we're dividing by 2. So we're going to count now what fraction of the whole shape one of these parts are. So we've got 1, so we want to know what one of them is, and that stays the same because we're only interested in one of them, but what has changed is how much we split this whole up into. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8 parts. So the fraction that one of these coloured parts is now is 1 out of 8, or 1/8. So we can see visually what's happening when we divide a fraction by our whole number. A quarter divided by 2 gives us 1/8. Fairly straightforward in terms of numbers that have got a numerator of 1. So let's have a look at another calculation here. And what we have here is 2/5. divided by 5. Now what's changed? Obviously the fraction has changed, but what's also changed is the numerator. It's actually now greater than 1. So we're going to follow the same steps. We've got a rectangle drawn out here which is going to represent our whole. We're going to split that rectangle into fifths, into 5 parts, and then we are going to shade one of those fifths. Sorry, this time we're doing 2 of the fifths because the numerator tells us that we have got 2 of the fifths there. And now we're going to consider the division element of it. So we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to split our 2 fifths, and indeed the whole shape, by 2. And we're splitting it by 2 because the divisor here tells us that we're dividing by 2. Okay. Now what changes slightly here when we're considering this answer is the groups that we split into. In the first example, we were just asking what one of the shaded parts, what fraction one of the shaded parts are. But now what we need to think about is the 2 groups that we have created. So I'm just going to highlight those. So we're dividing by 2. So we've taken the 2 fifths and we split it into one group here and another group here. And within each of those groups we have got 2 sections. So what we need to ask now is what fraction each of those groups is now. What fraction is each of those groups? So we've got two parts, and then we need to work out 2 parts out of how many. So each group has got 2 parts, but out of how many in total now? So let's count up them again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So 2 fifths divided by 2, we've split our 2 fifths into 2, and we've created 2 groups here because we're dividing by 2. You can see our 2 groups here. Then we're going to ask what fraction of the whole shape is each of those groups. So it's 2, 1, 2 out of a total of 10. So our fraction would be 2 out of 10. Now we can keep going with this, and it doesn't matter on what the divisor would be. So I'm going to go a bit off piste here, and we're going to draw our own one. So let's think of another fraction. Why don't we say 1/3? Maybe not 1/3. Let's stay with a quarter. So 1/4 divided by 3. So what we're changing here is actually the divisor. So once again, let's create ourselves a shape and split it into 4 parts. I'm cheating slightly here by using the shape tool, but you get the picture. So I've got one shape, and you can see that it's now split into 4 parts. I'm only interested in one of those quarters, so let's fill one of those quarters. And we're going to do the same thing again, except this time we're dividing by 3. So instead of splitting the shape into 2 parts, we're going to split the shape, and in this case rather roughly, into 3 parts like that. So you can see I've drawn 2 lines across to split my 1/4 into 3 parts. And once again I'm going to ask what fraction is each of these groups. So I've created here 3 groups because I'm dividing by 3. So let's just highlight those groups. I've got one group here, one group here, and a 3rd group here. But I'm only interested in one of those groups. This has gone a bit awry. Let's just make it a bit bigger. There we go. I'm only interested in one of these groups. So I'm going to ask what fraction is one of these groups. So it's obviously 1 out of how many? So let's count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it's 1 out of 12. So that's the understanding behind dividing fractions by whole numbers. What we are actually doing is splitting the fraction and therefore the whole shape up by the amount determined by our divisor, in other words the whole number. You may have started noticing some patterns emerging in these calculations, and we'll have a look at a strategy for dividing by whole numbers in the next video. So until next time, have a practice of your method and have fun.